Hello and welcome to another edition of Puck Talk with Spider Jack. I am Spider Jack. Joining me today, Boyd Farrish. How you doing, Boyd?
I'm doing well, Jack. How are you?
Excellent, excellent. Boyd is a member of Penalty Box Radio, slowly working his way up through the ranks. I'm just kidding. Boyd, I wish I were talking to you under better circumstances, but the Nashville Predators lost to the Arizona Coyotes. We've all had our immediate gut reactions. David Poile has talked to Preds media. We've had the exit interviews. The dust has officially been settled. All that we're doing right now is watching more playoff hockey. It's not the Predators, but let's talk about them. Boyd, what was the big difference between Arizona and Nashville? Why do you think that Arizona advanced and Nashville didn't?
I mean, truthfully, it was kind of two things. It was not making the mistakes at the really inopportune times, and then also being able to capitalize on the mistakes that were made. Because if you look at the series overall, I mean, especially at 5-on-5, Nashville dominated Arizona, and it really wasn't close. And if Nashville had certainly been able to have a little bit more finish to their game, it could have been a much quicker series going in the other direction. But, a few mistakes at really inopportune times, and just Arizona capitalized. They didn't miss when it counted, and Nashville pretty consistently did.
Yeah. And, now that we have seen that what I like to call the all-stars of 2015 lineup, now that we see that that doesn't work, right? Now that we see that just because you have money to throw around and you can go out and get a big name like Mikael Granlund or Kyle Turris or Matt Duchene, doesn't necessarily work, right? So who's one guy that you are really looking forward to who's been in Milwaukee that you look forward to on this Nashville roster next year?
I really look at two, and it's both on the offensive side. I think it's certainly Eeli Tolvanen. He absolutely tore it up down the second half of the season in Milwaukee. He was a goal scoring machine, and that certainly helped right the ship after a very difficult start to the season. But if that's the indication of him turning the corner, the sky is certainly the limit for what he could be in Nashville. And even in the press conference today, David Poile referenced the excitement about possibly seeing Tolvanen playing with Matt Duchene. So the concept of him being on a second line with Matt Duchene, that's a very interesting idea. And something that I think, what Tolvanen would do very well there is, with all of Matt Duchene's, skill and speed, he's a player that operates in space and wants to operate in space. And so he needs to have people on his line who can help create space for him. And someone like Tolvanen, because of the threat of his shot, has to be accounted for every time he's in the offensive zone. So that helps create the space for someone like Duchene to be able to operate and move and use his speed and the incredible puck skill that he has to be able to get out there and make plays. And then really secondarily for me, it's Yakov Trenin, a guy who is an absolute tank on the ice. Size, he's got good hands. He retrieves the puck well, controls the puck well, really kind of brings a number of different skill sets to the table. And, he's the kind of player that could be inserted into multiple spots in the lineup and be able to contribute positively. And if the Predators are really considering this sort of youth movement, which is probably a year or two overdue, he's really somebody that could come in and make an impact. when you think about it, he tied for second on the Admirals in scoring, and he played 15 games less than anybody else on the team, maybe more than that. I'd have to look it up specifically, but I mean, he was really putting the puck in the net. So, whether it's a fourth line role, a third line role, flexing up the lineup a little bit, there's just a lot he brings to the table that could make a really, really strong impact for the Predators.
And today, David Poyle said that some guys were not going to return to the team, right? And the three names that sort of stand out to me are Craig Smith, Mikael Granlund, and Kyle Turris. And those are three guys that, made up the second line just a year ago against Dallas. And now that it looks like none of them will return. So who do you think is a viable replacement for a guy like Craig Smith, who's going to be that consistent 20-goal scorer, right? Because Preds fans are used to seeing 20 goals a year out of Craig Smith. You don't really know what you're going to get out of Kyle Turris or Mikael Granlund anymore, and it doesn't look relevant. But Craig Smith is kind of the fan favorite here. So who's a viable replacement for Craig Smith?
I mean, first off, you really have to look at Tolvanen first, of someone who is, has that goal scoring capability. When you look at some of the younger guys, like a Rem Pitlick, who's got a lot of just kind of varied skill sets, skates well, controls the puck well, has some offensive finish to his game. Is he a 20-goal scorer? Hard to say. Maybe. Love to see it. So, you really have to start with who are the guys that really have that high-end capability. And, from Milwaukee, it's Tolvanen. Looking a little bit broader, maybe Philip Tomasino, who, my gosh, could he have looked any better in juniors this year? He absolutely dominated over the entire season across two different teams. And, he's entering, probably what is Mitch Marner territory of, you could send him back to juniors, but what else is he really going to gain because he is that much better than anybody else he's playing with?
Right.
He's a 100-point player in junior. So I think he's going to get a really, really strong look in Nashville. I think his question really is, does he have the rounded game to play in the top six? Does he have the size and the kind of physical maturity to play in the top six night in, night out? Or does he land more of maybe in a third line role with some power play time to maybe take some of the pressure off, but then give him some special teams to see if he can impact the game that way?
Okay. And we talked a little bit about this earlier, but 10 unrestricted free agents, and Yakov, Trenin, and Colin Blackwell are the only two that I see are guaranteed coming back, right? I think that they've just proven too much. They're too young. They've got too high of a ceiling to let them go right now.
Totally
but is there anybody amongst those 8 other names, guys like Corbian Holzer, Yannick Weber, Jared Tenor, are there any names that, even just salvageable, or is it just, let's just overhaul what we know about the bottom 6 and the third pairing for this Predators team?
I think for the bottom 6 and the third pairing, yeah, pretty much cut them loose. Cut them loose, start it over. If nothing else, the Predators need to get younger. They need to get cheaper. They have players who can fill some of those roles, who have a higher ceiling. I think the one player that's a UFA that they might really look to bring back would be Mikael Granlund. Just because he is still in his 20s. He played significantly better under John Hines, and he was visibly different. And, so if they can get him, say, maybe on a bit of a short-term deal, almost like a RFA bridge deal, even though he's already in his late 20s, there might be some convincing of Granlund that in this kind of flat cap environment, if he can play a year or two with the Predators, have strong seasons, he might still be able to sign that big deal at the age of 30, as opposed to signing a lesser version of it now. Remains to be seen how much that narrative might stick. But if he could be kept around as an additional top 6 player, that might help at least kind of buoy the transition to the younger players without really just going all in. Although certainly the wild card to that is someone like Tomasino, who, if he comes into camp and just blows everybody away, I mean, that kind of changes the whole narrative at that point.
And one thing that fans and media members are talking about alike is this, quote, lack of physicality on the team. Do you think that the Predators need bigger, bulkier players to solve this issue, or do you think they need to get smarter and get players that can avoid those big ice hits and hurt defenses who take those chances?
I think more so than just one or the other, it's more about roster balance and balancing skill sets. You look at the, now thankfully reunited top line of Forsberg, Johansson, and Arvidsson. Part of what makes them so unbelievably effective is the blend of their skill sets. Forsberg is very capable of being physical. Ryan Johansson, very capable of being physical. Victor Arvidsson is a speed demon. But their offensive kind of blend of skills, there is a reason why Victor Arvidsson skates into the zone and has 20 feet of empty space in front of him. Because the rest of the defense is looking at Forsberg going, well, we can't leave him alone. So, that leaves Arvidsson free to skate in and go 1980s clap bomb style and just float by goalies who have no help to do, whatsoever. But in terms of the overall physicality, yes, you need players who can play physical. That doesn't mean you have to go Tom Wilson, but you need to be physical enough to win the battles in the corners, win those net front battles and be able to clear it out in front of your own goaltender. So that has to be maybe a part of the lineup, but you want to look at, someone like Yakov Trenin who can do multiple things. He can forecheck, he can retrieve the puck, he can pass, he has a good shot, and oh, by the way, he also happens to be a freight train. So, it's making sure that, when you pick some of those attributes, you're also getting a player who is able to contribute positively in other areas.
Well, and let's talk about Trenin for a second, because Yakov Trenin, during his limited tenure in Nashville, I remember one specific play where he strips the puck in the offensive zone, drives all the way down in front of the net, hands it off to Kyle Turris, who scores the goal. Right? But other than that, Yakov Trenin didn't do a whole lot in the offensive zone, but also didn't allow many things going on in the defensive zone. He was just kind of that neutral player, at least for a couple of games. Obviously, it's not a complete statistical, reference point, but do you think that Yakov Trenin in Nashville plays significantly better? Or do you think that he sort of goes into that, I can't say that. Well, I can. Austin Watson territory.
Yeah. I think he has the capability to do more. He has a significant skill set in the sense that he has great hands, and is excellent controlling the puck, especially in tight spaces around the net. He has a good, if not great, shot. You're certainly projecting a little bit that he has brought more, will continue to bring more to the ice than Watson, and you're looking at a guy who, like I said, was second on the team in goals in something like 46 games in Milwaukee. So you project that out a little bit, and if he's a 15 to 18 goal scorer playing a third, fourth line role in Nashville, I mean, that is very, very solid. And you're looking at if he can play a little bit on the penalty kill, be responsible on his own end. He's played a lot of center. If he can win faceoffs, so if you can get a bit of the tangible and then mix in a little bit of the intangible skills, and if he wants to keep, one punching 6'9" monsters, then even better.
When John Jensen and I were talking in a private conversation, with youth comes a little bit of stupidity, and there's nothing more stupid than Yakov Trenin saying, "All right, Char, let's go." But
as we all learned later, he's a trained boxer, so maybe he knew what he was doing.
Yeah, exactly. He knew what he was. It's very clear that the Predators need youth because they have their veteran players. They have guys that didn't miss the playoffs until this year for a very long time. You got guys like Roman Josi and Ryan Ellis who have, they went through Milwaukee, they proved themselves, and now they're finally the leaders and the captains of this team. Do you see anybody in this youth roster, if you will, the AHL top two, if you will, do you see anybody that can one day become this Roman Josi, Ryan Ellis type leader?
I would definitely put Pitlick in that category. I mean, he was the leader of his team in college. He kind of did it all. He was the frontline guy. So you could certainly see him fit into that category. Even a guy like Dante Fabro, who's still very young. He was an associate captain when he was still in college. Everybody, fingers crossed, David Ferentz signs at some point. He would probably fit that mold as well. So there's some guys in the younger group who can certainly be leaders in the future. Hard to say if a Trenin or a Tolvanen fills that role. Tomasino was an associate captain in juniors. Remains to be seen with something like Igor Afanasiev where he fits this year, with his sizable production last year. If he starts to get elevated into a leadership role, there do seem to be a number of guys in the pipeline who kind of fit that character quality, and if they can grow into their game, grow into their persona, could certainly fit into that mold of a leader in the future.
And one more question, Boyd, and once again, thank you for coming on. Carl Taylor has done a tremendous job in Milwaukee in being there for his players, motivating his players to do well on a nightly basis, and also implementing a system that benefits every single one of his players. Right? So
how good were they this year? Wow.
Calder Cup for sure. I mean, they were locked in until the pandemic hit, and obviously we had to shut everything down. But like David Poyle said, the cupboard's getting a little full. Time to start bringing guys up. So how well do you see guys like Yakov, Trenin, and Ellie Tolvanen, who are used to Carl Taylor's tutelage, how well do you see them adjusting to John Hines' system, who's a little bit more defensive oriented?
I mean, honestly, I think they'll do fine. What I'm really looking forward to seeing, and I think we maybe even got a taste of it in the qualifying round, even if we weren't totally aware of it, is the impact of assistant coach Dan Lambert, who has been an offensive coach and has been a very successful offensive coach everywhere he's been. And in the beginning of the 1920 season, we saw little sprinkles of that until the road got a little tougher, and then it went right back to the La Violette show. And I'll be curious to see, assuming all the assistants are kept around, if Hines is a little more focused defensively, does Lambert really start to come to the forefront with his offensive strategy, which could play very well to some of these younger guys who, want to play on movement, finding spots to get the shots, maybe, enough structure to keep them in the right places, but not rigid. And the other thing that I think really comes into play is that really what Coach Hines it seems to be about is the motivation and the mental aspect of the players, maybe even a little bit more than just the structure. When you look at his press conference today, that was a lot of what he spoke about was the mental and emotional structure of the team, how they had progressed from when he first came in back in January, and sort of the almost mental fragility that they showed, throughout the first part of the season, to where, sort of in the back half of the season, they started to mount those comebacks, really show a little bit more of the drive that they hadn't shown in the early part of the season. So if he can maintain kind of that motivational aspect that he showed early off in his tenure, that's something that usually resonates very well with young players and might really help to bring them forward and be able to kind of showcase the best parts of their game.
Actually, Boyd, one more question, because you bring up a great point in that these young players are still moldable. You can still teach these young players things about the game right now. And John Hines is one of the best coaches in the game. He may not be the best strategy guy, but he is one of the best coaches for young players. So do you think, and obviously we can't predict this, do you think that maybe the Dallas series last year and the qualifying round against Arizona, do you think that maybe it was a blessing in disguise for this Predators team who very clearly needed a shakeup?
Very possibly. You look at the fact that they have not responded that well to adversity. That series against Dallas, and going forward, and then it was referenced today. You look at the Winter Classic where things started to go wrong and they just snowballed out of control and nobody could do anything about it. And so you're looking at everybody seems to recognize that things just weren't working. And while everybody in the room is going to say positive things about the room, because why would they say anything else? Players very rarely ever dog teammates, even if their teammates that they think are probably gone. It is potentially a positive that the team recognizes that they have to be a little bit different. They have to do things, a little bit more emphatically than maybe they were doing before. You look at, watching some of the games from the 2017 playoff run, for example, and you saw a team that was just never quitting. They were high pressure all the time. And you fast forward to 2018, 2019, and just that drive, that pace just wasn't there. It just was not the same team. And especially when they got kind of down and out, you just didn't see the push that you might have seen in prior seasons. So I think it's good to an extent that it gives them a little bit of a natural reset. You know, they went high, they're coming back down. Now they have a chance to sort of say, okay, start it over, reset, and figure out a way to really bring it back up. And one of the ways to do that is infuse some youthful enthusiasm into the roster, and you know, some guys that are just ready to go out and get it. And that oftentimes helps pull some of the veterans forward to say, you know, well, these young kids are going after it. I better go get after it too. Yeah.
Well, Boyd, we're officially out of time because unfortunately my Zoom plan is very cheap, so I gotta limit my Zoom meetings for. But Boyd, thank you so much for coming on, and
of course.
As soon as the NHL draft is over in October, you will be the first guest back on.
Awesome, man. I look forward to it. I really appreciate it, Jack.
Yeah, of course. Well, folks, this concludes another edition of Puck Talk with Spider Jack. Be tuned in for more, because I'm going back to college and we'll see. So y'all be safe out there. Have a good one.